Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstead, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seattle Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstead, here with co-host Keith Myers. Keith, how you doing?
I'm doing good. See this giant coffee I'm drinking? I'm feeling
nice.
I'm feeling great right now.
Yeah, it's 100 degrees here, so I'm not drinking coffee. I'm actually drinking some lemonade.
It's like 62 and a light rain here, so it's nice. I am enjoying it because
I haven't seen a cloud for 100 days, and I kid you not.
Oh, I don't doubt that. Like I said, I used to live down in the desert, and after a while, I just got tired of it. I'm like,
it's weird.
Can
like
we
wake up, it's blue sky. I mean, don't get me wrong. I really enjoy waking up early. I wake up like 6:15, 6:30 at the latest. You know, put on some clothes quickly, make a pot of coffee, go sit out on my patio, have a cup of coffee when it's 80 some odd degrees, before it gets hot, and just listen to the birds, and have the dogs out in the yard, and they're like, playing, and it's nice to be able to do that. But you're right, it's the same every day. I mean, it's crazy how similar it is every day. It's just nuts. Anywho, I am really happy to be here and record and kind of get lost for an hour and a half while we do that, with everything else going on in the world.
An hour and a half. So we've completely dropped the attempt at keeping these shows under an hour. Is that?
Yeah. And I mean,
we're 179 shows into this, and I think we've done it once. So.
I know. Crazy. Today, so we've got the next 4 or 5 shows planned out. Today we're doing breakout players. We brought our own list, 5 breakout players on offense that we think are going to have breakout years. Next week, we're going to do the defense. And then we're going to come back in about 3 weeks and do a best and worst case win-loss scenario show, which will be kind of fun. Then we've got a special guest right before training camp week, the week of July 22nd. We're going to have guest Dana O'Gorman join us for a look around the NFL, just general discussion, talk about what's going on out there. As we get closer to hopefully the season. And then the week of July 27th, we're going to record our training camp preview show. That is training camp week when everybody shows up, and hopefully we have a ton of talk about at that point. And but it's curious. I mean, before we get started with our show today, you watch the news about the COVID stuff, and you just get discouraged as a person, not only going through your own life and your own dealings with your family and trying to just navigate what's going on out there, but you're trying to hope for sports, and the NBA is trying to start their season again in about a month. And they're having a tough time with some COVID infections with a couple different teams. You've got Major League Soccer that's going into a bubble situation in Orlando that have, upon arriving into that bubble, one team has 6 players test positive, and now they're going to be going into quarantine. And so that, you're just trying to gauge the reality of, are we really going to play a season, and what will it take for that to actually happen? Do we need, the current spike levels for in multiple states to go down, to trend down, in order to even be able to have it be possible, or can we play through the current atmosphere as it is with these different spikes going on all over the place and trying to navigate that? It's somewhat. It's just hard to kind of wrap your brain around the whole thing. But the good news is we're here and we're going to talk Seahawks football, and we're going to kind of try to put that aside, and at least for the I don't know, the benefit of everyone, just kind of pretend that nothing's really going to go on and go wrong, and we're just going to play forward. So where are you at with this whole thing?
Right now, I mean, I like the team. The league has already announced they're going to cancel 2 of the preseason games, and just to try and keep the give the teams an opportunity to hopefully not have a big epidemic right before the season and all of that. I think they should push the season back. Like, don't cancel games, just start the season later, because the further back you push it, the closer you're starting to when a vaccine will be available. And if you want to push it back and make it a spring league this year and play starting in March, then go for it, because currently, you've got projections from, Anthony Fauci and other experts that say we could have a working vaccine by the end of the year and have it out to the majority of the country by sometime in March. So let's start playing football then. So we know we don't have to give up any games. We don't have to worry about like starting the season and then shutting it down or anything like that. I mean, that's what I would be doing, but they're intent on trying to play as is. And if you're going to do that, then cool.
Our first game right now, first regular season game is mid-September, September 13th. That's really gives us a little bit of time now here to figure this out and trying to understand if we can realistically stay on that schedule, or if it is better to postpone it or drop it back a couple months. And I think we all just need to kind of psychologically prepare for that. I mean, we've done really well so far in psychologically dealing with all of this to this point. And we certainly all want something to look forward to and hope for and so forth. And we need to keep that alive for as long as we can. But as we get closer to that time frame, we need to realistically be honest about where we're at. And if the league decides, there's a lot of economic pressure, not only just for the players and the contracts and the teams, but all the supporting economies around NFL football and so forth. It's a big decision that affects a lot of people. So they want to do the right thing. They want to make sure everyone's healthy, I think, first and foremost. So we'll see. So today, you did mention that they're going to cancel the first preseason game and the 4th preseason game, which means that we will be traveling to play the Houston Texans, and then the Chargers will be coming into the CenturyLink in Seattle. So I think that's probably a good idea. They want to limit exposure as much as possible and as long as possible. So that gives them a little extra time to kind of figure it all out. So again, today we are talking breakout players
on offense.
On offense, and the rule is that we weren't supposed to include rookies. Although we'll talk about a couple of them towards the end of the show, we'll add a couple.
And the reason,
and so we kept it
let's discuss
to
the reasoning behind
second-year
that.
players and.
Let's talk about the reasoning behind that, because so we were texting back and forth trying to figure out, like, are we allowed to include rookies on our lists and that kind of stuff? And I mean, the way we defined a breakout player is someone who statistically has this big jump in production. So they go from being, like a role player to being a massive contributor, a star, that kind of thing. And how do you determine that with a rookie? Like, are they are their stats going from 0 to whatever? Because then, if you think about it, you can make a case that any rookie that plays, even if they don't make a huge contribution, and they still are making, it's still a massive jump from 0 stats to whatever they did. And so then you have these people who are like, playing a few snaps a game that would count. And we didn't want to include that. So we were like, okay, let's scrap rookies and hold it to just the second-year players or older. And then that's the definition, though, is players that had a contribution last year, did something, and then this year we're expecting a huge jump in productivity.
Yeah, I think that says it for the most part, except for like linemen. I think I've got one, you've got one, I think, in your list that we talked about earlier. And those guys were just looking for, coming from a non-starting situation to coming into a starting situation on the line, making a big impact.
And playing
as far
well.
as that is, and playing well. Yeah. So, okay. So we're kind of put these guys in reverse order. Guys that are breakout players, but 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1 being the guy that we expect to have the largest impact. Mm-hmm. So I'll go first. My first guy is Jacob Hollister. We signed Jacob Hollister to a restricted free agent deal, second round tender in the offseason at $3.27 million for 2020, which a lot of folks looked at that and thought it was high. It's non-guaranteed, so they're looking at him maybe as a cap guy, but I don't think so. I think Jacob Hollister is a guy they really like. A guy that in 2018 had 4 receptions for 52 yards with the New England Patriots. We acquired him, right before the season for a 7th round pick. He was hurt initially, and then ended up playing in 11 games last year. Had 41 receptions, 349 yards, and 3 touchdowns, all in 11 games. So I think for me, projecting him forward, you put him in 16 games with that same sort of production. You're looking at 60 receptions, 500 yards, 5 TDs. And for a third tight end kind of a guy, that's excellent production. And when you look at him statistically and kind of some advanced stats, Pro Football Focus type stuff, he gets some of the best separation in the league from the tight end position. Right off the line at 6.8 yards of cushion. And then when he gets into his routes, and that ranked number 1, when he gets into his routes, he's got 3.5 yards of separation in route, which is number 6 in the NFL for a tight end. And then he's on the field as well for blocking snaps as well, rushing snaps. 130 of them last year with 1 blown block, second fewest in the NFL out of the tight end position.
Which is weird because he's not only not known as a blocker, he's known as a very bad blocker. So
yeah, so that was maybe a misnomer a little bit. He's 6'4", 245, so undersized for an inline guy, and they're not going to ask him to inline block every time, but a guy that could stay on the field, when they can't switch out, have substitutions and so forth. He holds his own, and so I think that a guy like that, you go from 41 receptions to 60. You've increased your yards, 150, 200 yards, and you're adding a few more touchdowns. That's a guy that's, taking his game and really contributing to the offense. That's my first breakout player.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. In fact, that's one of the players that I had listed in mine. And there's a couple of things. It's like last year he started out hurt, then he was on the practice squad. He only played in 11 games, but he still had a pretty big impact. He was actually a breakout player last year because he went from having
that's true.
4 catches for 52 yards to having 41 receptions for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was a big part of the offense down the stretch. The team depended on him for a lot of third down conversions, and he responded by playing really well, and he became the go-to tight end for the offense after Disley got hurt. And so it was kind of nice to see him kind of just develop into that role, and now he's going to get an opportunity to be that guy. And I would not have included him if it hadn't been for the injury of Colby Parkinson, the rookie, who is going to eat into those snaps because they play the same role. And at 6'7", you're going to see like the touchdowns and stuff go Parkinson's way because he's just a bigger red zone target. But with his injury and his inability to, because he'll be recovering right up to week 1 and maybe after week 1, but at least right up to week 1, which means he's going to miss all of training camp, all the preseason, all that practice time. He will, and we haven't had an off season where he's gotten ahead and learned stuff there. So I could just see him just not being ready for a role come week 1. And if that's true, well, then you're going to see Hollister continue to get a lot of opportunities. And if he comes in and plays well and shows that rapport that he developed with Russell Wilson last year, he's going to be a guy that they're going to keep him on the field because you're not going to take a productive player off the field. If he comes
he
on,
kept us in the playoff hunt last year. I mean,
yeah,
look at that. Look at that. Going from nothing, like you said, he had 4 receptions, 52 yards. Nobody expected any contribution from him. And then he was injured, and then he finally, came in towards the end of October, and Disley had been out for a couple weeks or a week, and it was perfect timing for him to come in and establish himself. And man, he really did. I mean, we really needed those 41 receptions, those touchdowns. I mean, those are clutch plays, at a time where we really needed him. So I just see him, having the ability to take it even further, adding additional games to the season. I think that he can have a sustained impact over the whole course of the season.
And I don't think it's unreasonable to expect his, not just to take what he did over 11 games last year and project it to 16, but to expand on his production because, his catch percentage, which is of the balls that were thrown in his direction, how many did he actually catch, was 69.5%, which is on the low side. And for a guy with really good hands, what that would say to me is that the reason why it was low is because Wilson threw the ball over his head out of bounds, on throwaways and that kind of stuff on some of them. But this is a guy that he could raise that to 75% pretty easily. And that adds a few more receptions to his total. His receptions per game was only 3.7, which was a lot lower than I was expecting. I was expecting it to be up just under 5. So, that's something that I think he could improve on there too. So it's not just having more games where to increase his productivity, but it's being more productive in each game as well. And so I think that Hollister becomes a solid choice as a breakout player for next year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, it is, in theory, a contract year for him yet again. He'll be an unrestricted free agent next year, and so he could definitely earn a pretty sizable paycheck if he plays as expected. So who did you have on your list to talk about first, Keith?
So I wanted to go with a lineman and talk about our new starting center, and that's B.J. Finney, coming over from Pittsburgh, where he was kind of a reserve. He played some center, played guard, played the other guard spot, got starters minutes because he was always playing, but bounced around. This is his first time where he's going to be a full-time starter at center, and he is built to be a center. That's his profile. He plays guard. He played guard in Pittsburgh because they had an all-pro at center in Pouncey. But Finney is a guy that he is a center, and he was a center playing out of position at guard, and now he's going to get a chance to play center full time. And I expect him to have, for him, a breakout year and just be really good. I expect he's going to be better than Britt because Britt was, he was like league average, and he's going to be way better than Joey Hunt was the second half of last year, who was overall fairly poor as a starter. And so to get that, they're basically getting this big upgrade at that position by having a guy that is kind of, that's who he is. He's built to be a starting center. And so I just think that counts as a breakout year for me. And I know it's going to be hard to show statistically, but I expect him to have a much bigger role and contribution to the Seahawks this year than he's had at any other year in his career when he was with Pittsburgh.
He's more in line with the size of like Justin Brett. Joey Hunt's really undersized. This guy's 6'4", 318. He's been in the year since 2015, and he's just now getting his chance to start. He hasn't been bad. Last year he played 325 offensive snaps for Pittsburgh, had one penalty in all of those snaps, one sack allowed. He's Pro Football Focus has him as a 72 overall grade in pass blocking and 52.1 in run blocking. So definitely right now a better pass blocker, but it's a small sample size. So they feel confident after watching all the tape to come in and give him the job and allow him to start. When you take a look at the roster behind Finney, it's Hunt, Posick, and Fuller. So it's clear that that job is his. So you're right. I mean, here's a guy that's got 5 starts and is going to start, 17, 18 games, hopefully more than that for you.
He has 13 career starts, but he's played in 59 games in his career, but he's got 13 career starts. How many sacks has he given up in his entire 4-year career? Do you know?
Let me see if I can find that really quick.
I have it, so I'll just give it to you. It's 0.00. That's how many sacks he's given up ever.
I had him shown as giving up 1 last year. Pro Football Focus, anyway. I'm
looking at Pro Football Reference, and they've got him at 0. Okay. And so, yeah, I mean, that is
outstanding.
This is a guy that
that's outstanding.
This is a guy who can pass block, and he's really good at it. And to have someone who can pass block in front of Russell Wilson is going to be new. We haven't had a great pass blocker in front of him in a long time.
Well, think about that. I mean, Britt has always been a fairly decent run blocker and a poor pass blocker. And when you take a look at the way that Russell Wilson has been used over his entire career, he's, for whatever reason, those passing lanes in the middle of the line have just not been there. And so he has been rolling out to be able to throw slants and all that kind of stuff in the middle and utilize the tight ends better and all that kind of stuff. And so the guy up the middle, like you said, being able to pass block and set that wall up there up front, especially with our guards, we could end up having a better short game this year, passing wise. Obviously we're going to stretch the field on the sides, but slants and underneath routes and slot, catching balls out of the slot and stuff could be a big thing this year that we haven't seen before.
Cool. Who's your next one?
All right. Next one's a new guy to the team for me. He's been around a little bit. Philip Dorsett. Wide receiver, 2015 first-round draft pick. He's 5'10", 192. Seahawks picked him up this year on a 1-year deal. His last stop was in New England, where he's catching balls from Brady. In 2019, he had 29 receptions, 397 yards, 5 touchdowns. And he was basically their lone deep threat guy, catching those balls. Now, in moving to Seattle, he will have at least 2 other deep ball threat options and the best deep ball thrower in the NFL in Russell Wilson. The thing to keep in mind with Dorsett is he's never really lived up to that first round kind of thing. He's failed to reach 35 receptions or 600 yards in any single season. And then if Josh Gordon, who we've talked about before, gets reinstated, this spot kind of goes to Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon's had breakout seasons before, so I wouldn't put him on this list, but he would take basically Dorsett's,
he would take a bunch of his
at least
out.
Quite a share of the snaps, right?
Yep.
But Dorsett's got an opportunity, I think, to have a career year here with those factors I just mentioned, and the fact that if you take a look at the offensive lineman we brought in this year, signs point to us throwing the ball better or at least more efficiently. Now, we've been a very efficient throwing team, but adding a guy like Dorsett, having all the weapons that Russell Wilson has right now, gives you an opportunity to have Philip Dorsett in single coverage a lot. And if you can stretch the field with him, Metcalf on the other side, lock it underneath, this could be something where he could end up having 35, 40 receptions, 500, 600 yards, a dozen or more touchdowns. He could have the impact that we always thought Jerron Brown had the potential of having. This is more of a proven commodity, and I think gives some more upside to the offense.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very similar pickup for the Seahawks that Jaron Brown was. This is a guy who, I mean, right? Because it's someone who is on their second contract, but you sign for not a lot. You come in, you expect a role player. You're not expecting someone to come in and be a star. And they've got a track record that's okay. It's not great.
Yeah,
The
it's
biggest,
okay. I mean, I'd take 30 receptions, 400 yards, and 5 TDs from Dorsett this year. I mean,
yeah.
that's the floor for him, I think, in this offense.
Well, and when I look at this, and I go through and I'm like, okay, who are his quarterbacks? Well, for the last 3 years, his quarterbacks have been the New England Patriots. So that means Tom Brady. Now, Tom Brady is great at getting the ball out super quick and making those reads, and he's got a lightning fast release and all that. But you know what he doesn't do well? Throw the ball deep. He doesn't have the arm for it. He did at one point in his career 10 years ago, but he hasn't been a deep ball thrower since Moss left. So since then, I mean, he is a dink and dunk, efficient, move the ball that way. And Dorsett doesn't fit that at all. He's a straight line burner with just insane speed to get downfield. So
yeah, 4.28 40 at the combine.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who it's just not a good fit as far as his skill set and the team's offense and scheme and all of that. That was not a great fit. When he was in Indy, I mean, there was, I think, 1 year where he had luck, but then another year when it was Jacoby Brissett was the primary thrower. And so again, you run into that same issue. And so it's very tough to say that, oh, that's all he is, a 25 reception, 350 yard kind of guy. He just seems to be a guy who's kind of misused, and it's not the fault of the coach. It's more just his skill set and the quarterbacks he's playing with aren't a great fit. And for the first time ever, his skill set, which is getting deep and getting behind people, and his quarterback skill set, which is the best deep thrower in the NFL, it's a nice fit. And so to have him get on the field and to stretch the ball deep, and that teams are not going to be focused on him. They're going to be focused on DK Metcalf, because Metcalf is, absolutely one of the biggest threats on the field anytime he's out there, because he's so big and so fast and so physical. He's such a dominating presence that's where the safeties are going to be looking. That's where the extra coverage is going to go. And then you've got Lockett, who's a tiny guy, but is insanely productive and one of the best receivers in the NFL when you look at his efficiency and productivity too. And so, Dorsett's going to be the third option.
Or even the fourth or fifth, because you're going to have Olsen, you're going to have Disley, then
Hollister, you got people coming out of the backfield.
Holy cow.
I mean, they have a lot of options. And so
they do.
Who do you double team? Who do you take away? All that kind of stuff. Like, Dorsett's going to be way down on that list as far as defense. He's going to find himself matched up against linebackers occasionally as a slot receiver, or a strong safety. He's going to be able to. They're going
to find mismatches.
Yeah,
I mean, this is going to be a really interesting offensive year for Schottenheimer, if you really think about it, with all these weapons that he's got the ability to scheme things. So Schottenheimer's never really been a scheme guys open type of offensive coordinator. And it'll be interesting to see how that tweaks just a little bit this year, because you definitely want to take advantage of some mismatches. I mean, if you ever get DK Metcalf on an island, you got to take advantage of that. If Philip Dorsett is out there and he's on a guy that's oversized, or a big safety or linebacker that's not going to be able to stay with him, you got to send that guy deep.
Yeah. Well, and you send him deep, and then you watch what the free safety does. Because if you send him deep and the free safety recognizes that his linebacker is going to get torched and runs out of position to get over there to help, well, now you got a big gaping hole in the middle of the field for Lockett to run a post pattern in and go for touchdown, right? So you have those kind of situations where the Seahawks are going to be able to dictate some of those matchups, and the defenses, they just don't have, you can't focus on everybody. And
the weird thing is this actually opens it up for Russell Wilson to to have a really decent running year this year as well. It's
because they're going to be dropping
want
people
him
back
to
and dropping
exactly.
people back, and so he's gonna have a little bit more time. Plus, their pass blocking should be significantly better. And if they give him lanes, especially in the second half, if the offense has kind of been sputtering a little bit, what does Wilson do? He starts picking up first downs with his feet a lot. In order to gain some of that time, gain some of that rhythm, string together some first downs, and then the offense suddenly improves. And when he starts doing that, it's great things for the Seahawks. And he should have more opportunities to do that this year because
I think this is an underrated signing, Philip Dorsett. I mean, I think it's one of those deals where, like I said, Jerron Brown was just such a huge disappointment. We could have used the production out of him, and if we can get Philip Dorsett to get 35 receptions, 500 yards, 6 TDs, it'll be a tremendously successful season because those stats alone will point to the fact that we were very successful in other areas of the offense in order for that to happen.
So we are 3 for 3 here on picking players that were on my list.
Really?
So yeah.
I guess I wasn't paying attention. Awesome. So where do we diverge? Is it right here?
It's probably at this point because I don't. But why don't you go ahead and give us another one?
Okay.
Because we're like I said, we're 3 for 3 for mine.
Well, you went for an offensive lineman last time. I'm doing my offensive lineman right here, and it's not Finney.
Okay.
It's Phil Haynes.
Nice.
Phil Haynes last year started one game, and it was a playoff game at the end of the year against the Green Bay Packers, and that was it. I think he was in for an extra point or something like that ended up getting blocked. That was his only other play in the entire year, other than the Green Bay game.
Yeah, but he wasn't. He wasn't 6'4", the reason why it got blocked.
No, he wasn't. Well, he wasn't. I mean, Fetty was in there, and so you could easily blame him, and I'm sure you would.
Actually, if you go back and actually watch the tape, it's a Fetty who gets pushed back 4 yards by the guy who blocks it. So yes, it was him.
All right, 4th round, 2019, Phil Haynes, left guard. He's a big guy, road grader. Really loved the pick at the time, and then he started the season on the PUP list after sports hernia surgery before training camp started, and that basically ruined it for him. Didn't get a chance to have a regular season snap at guard. Like I said, his only playing time was at Green Bay. Kind of mixed results there, but whatever. That's a tough game to go in and start after you haven't played all year.
Yeah, your only snaps all year are a playoff game against the Packers. I thought he played well. You said mixed results. I guess there were some pass blocking snaps where he struggled a little bit.
He got bullnosed a little bit.
But as a run blocker, he did really well. I mean, that's who he is. He's a guy that basically he is a younger, should be less injury prone, and significantly cheaper version of Mike Lupati. Just absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and that's the deal, Keith.
Blocker.
He's on my list because I expect him to beat out Mike Lupati out of training camp and be on the breakout player list, because if he doesn't make this list. So I want him to be able to beat Mike Lupati. There's nothing against Mike Lupati, but he's an older vet. We're paying him a lot of money. Phil Haynes deserves an opportunity. I think if he gets the opportunity and he's not injured, I think he beats him out, because if you end up starting Finney and Haynes and then Damian Lewis at right guard, I think that you've got a really nice nucleus there to stick together for a long time.
Yeah, you basically those 3 guys, you have the interior of your line set for the next 3 years. And even if Mike Lupati starts the season as the starting left guard, I don't believe he'll be there. He won't start 16 games. Hayes is going to get his chance. He's going to get playing time. He's going to be in there. So I think he can have a breakout year anyway. Even if he doesn't, even if he isn't the starter week 1, because when was the last time Mike Lupati played a 16-game season?
Yeah, he's good for about 10 games.
Yeah, and so you're going to get Hayes is going to get his opportunity, and what we saw last year from Lupati is that he is replaceable. He's not that good anymore. He's older. He's taken his injuries. He's battled. He's a good leader and a guy who will fight through a lot of stuff, but he just isn't the athletic specimen he once was as far as just the pure power in the running game. So he is replaceable, and you've got a young kid who has the same athletic qualities that Lupati used to have, and Hayes is going to get a chance, and I expect him to do well. I didn't have him on my list. This is the first one that hasn't been, and the reason why is because I don't trust Pete Carroll to give the job to the younger player, because of the fact that I expect Damian Lewis to start at right guard, and with BJ Finney being new and Shell being new on the line, and I'm like, he's going to be like, I can't have 4 new starters week 1. So he's going to
that's the legit argument.
Yeah, and so that he's basically like Lupati's going to get the job, and that he's only going to lose the job by either being terrible or by injury. And I expect Hayes to get a chance to play, and he's going to get on the field because there's no way Lupati makes it through a whole season without getting hurt. But I didn't put him on my list, and I went with Finney as my lineman because of that dynamic, and that's it. But it's still a good pick by you. I like it.
All right, you're next.
My next one is going to be one that I think we are both going to agree on. And that is going to be wide receiver DK Metcalf.
Nice.
Even though he was a rookie,
I had him as my number 1 guy.
Even though he was a rookie last year, he still could count as a
breakout player.
As a breakout player, because he was incredibly good, just way better than we ever would have expected him to be. And I know people are going to look at that and be like, no, that is what we expected him to be. But honestly, a rookie, especially
we spent
on this
the better
team,
part of the entire 2019 season tamping down expectations for him last year, Keith, because it was so easy to fall in love with the prospect and dream about a receiver that he ended up becoming, but not this year. We're not tamping down expectations this year. I think we're probably even elevating them slightly.
Oh yeah, because there's no reason to tamp him down now. I mean, you go into and you're like, okay, it's a rookie, and he's going to have to learn all this stuff, and there were reasons to think that last year. There aren't now, and so you're talking about a guy who, in 16 games he had 100 targets. Right, that's a lot. That's a target share, but he went for 58 receptions. 900 yards and 7 touchdowns, which is way more than we expected for him. The one drawback out of all of this is that 58% catch percentage. I mean, that's low.
Check this out.
Low.
So in the playoffs, he had 11 receptions for 218 yards and a touchdown. So his reception catch rate went from 58%, which you just mentioned is poor, to 78.5% in the playoffs. So there is some optimism there and that catch rate did go up towards the end of the year as well. So
it did.
From about that Philly game, that regular season game on, he started really performing well. And his route tree expansion during his rookie year, was very encouraging. So that in the 2020 version of DK Metcalf, I think the entire offense is open to him as far as all the routes and all that stuff. So they're going to be moving him around all over the place, creating mismatches. We already talked about all the other weapons that Russell Wilson has, which is only going to make DK Metcalf's life as a wide receiver that is got the spotlight on it now easier, because there's just going to be too many guys. And if it happens to be that DK Metcalf, spends 2 or 3 or 4 games throughout the year being the decoy guy in order for the offense to just completely flourish for everyone else, so be it. But I still think that if you take a really realistic look, if you go from 58% to say 65% catch rate, maybe even slightly more, it just depends on how they use him. But he could end up having 75, 80 receptions, 1,200, 1,300 yards, 10 TDs, Pro Bowl. I mean, that's the kind of situation that I'm expecting from DK Metcalf. He just has premier all-pro wide receiver ability written all over him.
Yeah, I mean that is who he is athletically. He is a guy that you put in the same category as Julio Jones and Nuke Hopkins as potential, best receiver in the NFL kind of player. He was really raw coming into the NFL. He dropped for fairly obvious reasons, but he lived up to a lot of that promise last year and really showed us the talent that he has. And he can absolutely improve on his statistics from last year and really be a difference maker, a guy that can just dominate games when needed. And that's what I expect from him. And so that's how I threw him in here as a breakout player, because even though he had a great year last year,
well, and we already made the rules before. We said no rookies can be breakout players.
Yep.
So
like I said, even though he had a great year last year, he's still going to have a breakout year because he's going to be that much better. That's to me, it is frightening. Remember, this is a kid that's 22 years old too. He's young.
Dude, look at what I'm wearing right now. I got my DK. I got my brand new, the first time I've ever worn it, DK Metcalf jersey on.
Nice.
You guys can't see it, but that's what's happening. I wholeheartedly endorse your breakout player in DK Metcalf. I mean, he is everything that everybody thinks he is, and potentially much more, which is just extremely exciting. I mean, it's been a long time since Seattle's really had a weapon in this sort of caliber, and it's hard to even think of one. And he tilts the field. I mean, John Schneider likes players like that. Loves players like that.
Who would you say was the last player of that caliber at the position? In
wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks? Brian Blades, maybe.
See, I would have said pre-injury Sidney Rice when he first came over from Minnesota.
Sidney Rice never did it for me.
Oh, he was so good.
Yeah, but he was good at Minnesota.
No,
when he got to Seattle, he just doesn't.
He was. Never. I mean, remember he was playing with Tavares Jackson. But
I know.
Yeah, and then and then the first year with Russell, even then he was injured and struggling a little bit. He still did things at the position that we hadn't seen. Brian Blades would be a good one. I would have probably said Joey Galloway.
Yeah,
that would probably
Joey Galloway. Yeah. And quite frankly, you can go back to Largent now. I mean,
that's a different kind of guy.
Yeah, I know. There's a different kind of guy. The guy that can blow it off is probably Joey Galloway. But even DK, there's something about the DK Metcalf situation, just the size and the length and the speed combo that DK Metcalf even separates him from all those guys.
Yeah. I mean, this is a guy with all pro potential, as you said. So, cool. Is that all 5 for you, or do you have one more?
I have one more.
Why don't you do yours? Because my last one, I think, is going to be controversial, and it'll be fun to end on. So nice. Go for it.
Controversy, yes. We don't have that very often on this show.
No.
Okay.
You're too agreeable.
Yeah. All right. So mine is fully dependent on health, and I admit that. Mm-hmm. But given the opportunity, and the health. Will Disley is my choice. Now, DK Metcalf was my number one overall breakout player. and I kind of had to lay these out in order, but we talked about him. So Will Disley was my number 2 guy, tight end, 6'4", 265, fourth round in 2018. Had the patellar tendon thing in 2018, shortened his season. The Achilles in 2019. Here's the deal though. If you project what Will Disley has done in 10 games total into a full 16 game schedule, he would post an 87.1 grade from Pro Football Focus in receiving, 55 catches, 743 yards, 11 touchdowns. I mean, that's kind of Rob Gronkowski kind of numbers.
And on top of that, he is really, really good at blocking.
Yeah.
Like we talk about the receiving stats when it comes to tight ends, but that's only half their job. And in some situations, it's less than half their job. Being able to block, especially line up, next to the right tackle and block a defensive end one-on-one is something that tight ends are asked to do. And a lot of tight ends fail at that. Disley doesn't. He is a top of the line inline blocker.
If you take a look too at his catch rate, so 75.6. So we just talked about DK Metcalf being at 56. This guy's catch rate is 75.6. No, it's only a 10 game sample. I understand that, but it's 13.5 yards per reception. If you really think about it, this guy at the tight end position has a very similar effect on the game that DK Metcalf has from the wide receiver position, just in terms of overall effect on the efficiency of the offense and so forth. And you combine that with Olsen, who comes in. In 2019, Olsen had 52 receptions for 600 yards and 4 touchdowns. You add that to Disley, and you end up with one of the best 1-2 tight end combinations in the entire league. And Pete Carroll said this on October 18th on a Cairo News Radio interview. He said, as a matter of fact, he's talking about Disley, his surgery on Thursday was really successful. He had a minimally invasive procedure that worked about as perfectly, and he'll come back as a good couple of months before he would have gotten back otherwise. Mm-hmm. And also word, out on the street now is that Will Disley is nearly 100%. And working out at 100% speed, posted a couple of videos, et cetera, cutting and all that stuff. I just think that this guy is like primed to have a breakout season. So if he were to stay healthy for the entire season, we'd be talking about a Pro Bowl possibly for Will Disley.
Oh, and I think this is a great pick. I didn't include him in my list because I need to see him stay healthy. He's only made it through 10 games in 2 years, and the patellar tendon was really unfortunate, and the Achilles actually isn't a huge surprise because if you look at other players that have had the patellar tendon injury, either an Achilles or a calf tear on the other leg the following year, it's really, really common.
Well,
and that's what happened to him.
It was only a partial too. It wasn't a full rupture. It was a partial tear, and that's a huge difference, I think, in this situation.
And so, like I said, it was a single unfortunate injury. I think the second one you can entirely just say, oh, it's because of the first one. And so you can kind of not go into the, situation where we're talking about him being injury prone or silly things like that. But at the same time, I need to see him do it. Stay healthy.
I do too, but I put him on my list anyway because he's just too good not to.
He's such a good player. Way, way better than he ever showed in college, which is crazy to me. That a guy that looked like he just had no athleticism and couldn't run, on his college tape can come to the pros and look like an all-pro when he's out there, or at least a Pro Bowler, maybe not an all-pro, but still one of the better players in the league at his position.
Well, I mean, if you take a look at him statistically, if you go to that catch rate, you go to the yards per reception, you go to the overall catches and yards and the touchdown productivity that he has, and you look at Kelsey, and you look at Gronkowski, and you look at Kittle, he's on par with every single one of those players.
Yeah. So if you go through, one of the things that I like to do when you start sorting players and whatnot is I like to look at yards per target, because then that counts into effect that catch rate, right? Because the lower catch rate, it's hard to have a high yards per target because you're all those targets count against you if you don't catch them. And you do that. He is, the players that are above him are all players that have tiny samples, like Josh Gordon and Nick Bellore, Malik Turner. He's better on yards per target than Tyler Lockett, who's the next player underneath him. DK Metcalf, who's right underneath Tyler Lockett. And I mean, to me, that says a lot right there. So you look at that, and he's that high on the list in terms of yards per target. And then the surprising one out of all of those, when I started looking at that, was Hollister, is down near the bottom of the team and yards per target. So yeah. I was expecting him when I first started looking into this. I expected him to be near the top because it just felt like every time he got an opportunity, he was picking up a first down. But I think that's part of it, is that he got all of those receptions and first downs on short catches.
Will Disley generated 14 first downs on 23 receptions in 6 games. So that's decent production right there.
That's great, actually. So, yeah.
So, okay. So that was my guy at the top. So you said yours was controversial. Prove it.
I have a controversial one. My fifth, which I saved this one for last, but it's not my number one. My number one was DK Metcalf, but I saved this one for last because I thought it would be the most fun. And that would be Rashad Penny as a breakout player.
Wow.
And you're going to be
nobody is talking about Rashad Penny right now.
No, because Rashad Penny had a devastating knee injury late in the year. He will not be ready to play week 1. He will be on the PUP list. He won't come back to play until week 7.
What if he is ready, though?
He won't be.
I've been hearing rumors that he's possibly ahead of schedule.
Even if he's ahead of schedule, he still is not going to have practiced before week 1. I don't expect it. He'll be on the PUP list. But here's the reason why I put him on the list. If you go back and look at last year, which was his second year and his best year pre-injury.
He had like 70 carries for 350 yards.
65 carries for 370 yards. That's his best year because the year before he barely played. But he was really coming on, eating into Chris Carson's snap. I think because, I don't know. I think
especially
early on
with Chris Carson's like 7 or 8 fumbles. I just didn't get
early
it.
Early on in the year, Penny had a nagging hamstring injury, and so they eased him into the role. But once he started getting touches and started getting more playing time, he really started to eat into Carson's touches. Really started to become, not just the second guy, but more like 1A versus 1B rather than 1 and 2. If you look at his yards per rushing attempt at 5.7. I mean, that's great. Carson was at 4.4. And so really looking like a guy that can make a major impact. Now, he won't play. I'm honestly going to straight up say he won't play the first 6 weeks because being on the PUP list, he'll come back. And then he comes back to a crowded room with Chris Carson there.
Yeah. And what if Carlos Hyde has on pace for over 1,000 yards? Then what do you do?
Carlos Hyde's there. DJ Dallas is there. And I know I'm higher on him than you are, but he's still a good player. And so he's going to come in and have to fight for snaps from those guys. But here's the thing. We saw last year, right before his injury, that this is a guy that can take over a game and really dominate. And he's only got to do that a couple of games. And he will outpace last year's production, which was his best year. If he gets out there and has a few games where he's, the number 2 guy and getting like 50 yards or 45 yards, maybe a touchdown here or there, and then has a couple of big games like we know he can, where he goes for over 102 scores and that kind of stuff. Now suddenly he's gone from 370 yards to 500 yards on the year. He's gone from 3 touchdowns to 6 and that's a breakout year for him.
Yeah.
Because and he will have done it in a year that was half a year. I mean, he totally
Well, and if he
is
stays
possible.
healthy until the end of the year, through the end of the year, it's easier to move on from Carlos Hyde next year and bring Rashad Penny back in, especially in a Chris Carson contract year.
Chris Carson's also, yeah, I mean, he's in a contract year. So Penny coming in, if he does well once he comes back from his injury, and we're going to remember, he's going to be 24 next year. He's still a really young guy, despite the fact that it's his third year. And so he's going to have an opportunity to show that he can be the lead. And then you're like, okay, if he's going to be the lead, we still need another guy. What do we have in DJ Dallas? They'll learn that this year. And then they'll be like, do we want to bring Hyde back? If we can get him on a discount again. Do we want to pay Chris Carson? Because I think he's going to demand a big salary. I don't know if the team wants to go big, as far as the salary. What
would you give for Chris Carson? That'd be a realistic. Like, would you do a 3-year, $21 million deal for Chris Carson?
I do that. I do 3 years,
$7.5 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, I do that and part of it would be the way the guaranteed money would set up is after 2 years, if I needed to, I could cut him.
So are you more? I mean, we're paying Carlos Hyde close to the league minimum. Rashad Penny's on a rookie deal. Chris Carson's on a rookie deal. We're not paying any running back right now. Why would you pay Chris Carson $7 million a year for 7 fumbles a year and 1,200 yards when you can get 1,100 yards out of Carlos Hyde on a minimum, or Rashad Penny comes on and gives you close to 1,000?
Hyde's not making the minimum. He's making $4 million this year.
Is he? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not paying it. Sorry, I don't have the information in front of me right. I'm just kind of talking. But I mean, running backs are, and this conversation is not just with the Seahawks. This is with every team. Why are we going to pay a guy,
a running back,
to be the number one running back going forward for the Seattle Seahawks? I mean, we did with Marshawn Lynch. We haven't since, but now we're in that position again where we need to pay somebody maybe. And do we, considering if you look at all the other deals that we need to get done?
I mean, Carson he's a premier back. He really is. If you look at his production, yards per carry at 4.4, his touchdowns, his ability to break tackles. I mean, he got 1,230 yards last year, despite only, he played in 15 games, really played in 14 games because then
laying the ball down 7 times.
And so he kind of got, he had that, but this is he did all of this despite having really poor blocking in front of him. I mean, this is a guy who is, if you look at his yards per attempt after contact, he was like 3rd in the NFL, which means in order to get to 4.4 yards per contact, he was having to earn.
Who was 4th in the NFL?
I don't rememr. I don't have that in front of me. Was it?
Mm-hmm.
And so you know what I mean? So you're talking about guys who Carson's production is not a function of his offensive line. It's a production of him just being really good at his job. And I think that if you can get him on a team-friendly deal, like the 3-year, $21 million, so you're paying $7 million a year for him, and then you know that after 2 years, if things aren't working out, if you're starting to break down, you can move on. You do it, and then you have Penny still there. You've got DJ Dallas still there. You've got a nice running back room. And for a team that wants to run the ball a lot, you need to have more than one guy.
Yeah. And there's no question when you watch Chris Carson run too. It's exciting. It's fun. You feel good. You're glad he's the Seahawk.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that the numbers, it's just hard. I think if Chris gives you, 1,300 yards again this year and fumbles the ball a little less, I think the Seahawks are going to pay him. It's just a question of, is he going to get $5 million a year? Is he going to get $8 million a year? And I think it's hopefully somewhere in between.
Like I said, I'd be willing to pay 7. I'm not willing to pay 8 or 9. I'm certainly not going to go up into the Ezekiel Elliott range. I think the Cowboys were.
Do you think, it'll really depend on if Chris Carson's realistic about getting paid and wanting to stay with the Seahawks. And so I don't know that right now. It's hard to know how a player is going to react to a lower contract offer. Does Seattle go in and offer 5.5? I know if I was Seattle, I'd probably try, because you've got Homer, Dallas, Hyde, potentially available to come back, Penny. It's really, we're not so dependent on Chris Carson to have to pay hostage money, basically, to get him back on the team. So we've got some options there. It'll be interesting. Rashad Penny breakout. Wow. I'm still trying to get over that, Keith. So
hey, I told you I was going to bring one that would.
Well, especially, every expectation is that he starts the year on the pup, and then Hyde's established himself, and Chris Carson's there, and it's like, where does he get carries? What if DJ Dallas comes in and has an okay year? Penny could end up having less carries than he had last year.
True,
but
he could.
If Chris Carson is hampered by injury, if Carlos Hyde is struggling at all, if Dallas
both of those guys
quite
are
ready,
good,
Penny could come in and really establish himself as a number one back.
Hyde and Carson are both starting caliber backs, but they're also guys who don't play 16 games a year. These are guys that don't have the durability is a concern for them, and so
I know that's another reason to hedge against Carson.
And I think that is going to give Rashad Penny an opportunity to make an impact down the stretch.
Yeah, and he could very well be returning in season at a moment in time where we need help. Because at 6-7 weeks, you're starting to break down at certain positions, and running back is one of them sometimes. And
yep.
So we'll see. So we thought we'd hold on to a couple of rookies just in case we decided that rookies should be part of a breakout criteria. We had a couple in reserve. I didn't write mine down, so I kind of made it up right before we started the show. I kind of had one, though, that I wanted to include in my list from the very beginning, but left off.
Well, we did set the rule that we weren't going to include rookies, but I wrote down rookies because I fully expected you to cheat and include rookies. And so I'm like, okay, I've got my list of 5, but I've got a couple of rookies ready in case you change the rules on me.
Okay. Well, I'm changing the rules right now. Let's go for it. Let's add our 2 rookies in.
Okay. I think we should start with Damian Lewis and
I've got him on my list as well.
Because this guy he's a monster. He is huge. He is powerful. You do not find offensive linemen built like him. He is DJ Fluker, but younger, cheaper, and more durable. Big, powerful guy. He will take some of the best run stuffing defensive tackles and drive them 5 yards backwards. And if that doesn't count as something that you could get behind as a breakout, then I don't know what is.
Yeah, no, I agree. Here's a guy with all the potential in the world. He's known right now as a mauler in the run game. He's 6'2", 330 pounds. He's a leader. He was a leader at LSU on their offensive line. He's going to come in and kind of take over that position, I think, in time with the Seattle Seahawks. I expect him to start right out of the gate. I think everyone else does too. He's thick and powerful. He dominates, in the run blocking. Needs a little bit of help with pass blocking, but he's got a couple of guys on each side of him that kind of excel in pass blocking. So I think he'll pick that up. Yeah, I'm excited, Keith, about a offensive lineman, which, for me, doesn't happen very often. Now, you get excited at every little, opportunity and so forth on the offensive line.
I get that. I talk about offensive line, and when I do, people change this, the channel and go listen to a different podcast because nobody cares about the offensive line but me. I get it, but honestly, I think this kid's going to be good.
Yeah.
He's just going to be good. So, who do you have besides?
Well, another guy I actually thought about writing down, and I don't even know why, is another offensive lineman. Now, this isn't my pick that I'm going to talk about here because he's not a rookie, but it's Chance Warmack on the offensive line, a guy that's coming in that's 28 years old.
Former first round pick.
Tennessee starting right guard for the first 3 seasons of his career. Injured reserve in 2019, was a reserve lineman for the Eagles in 17 and 18 before, ending the season there on injured reserve. In 2019, he was completely out of football. Here's a guy that was in Alabama, was like a top 25 recruit in the nation as an offensive lineman out of high school, 6'2", 223. He's one of those guys that you don't want to count out. He comes in to compete. All of a sudden, he's a guy that can't be kept off the field for whatever reason. I'm not saying, maybe Damian Lewis has a little injury or a hamstring or whatever. Who knows, right? All of a sudden, Chance Warmack gets his opportunity to come in, and you can't keep him off the field. He ends up starting and making a real big impact. He could have a breakout year for you.
So wait, didn't I just mention until we talk about cheating when we do these lists that this is supposed to be the part where we talk about rookies, and you're bringing in a guy who
No. He's not my guy. This is not my guy. This is not my guy. I didn't write anything down. I don't have him. I'm just saying he's another guy that you can consider on the offensive line. You really could. All right.
Yeah.
Here's my guy, my rookie.
Okay.
And darn it, just a couple weeks ago he got hurt, and otherwise he would have been a surefire pick on this list, and that's Colby Parkinson, the tight end out of Stanford, 4th round pick, 6'7", 260 pounds, runs a sub 4.66, 4.65 40, something like that. A guy that could really have an impact in the red zone this year. Now, he's not going to probably give you 40 receptions as a rookie this year with all the other receiving talent that the team has, but he could definitely have a fairly sizable impact for you in the red zone, especially if like a guy like Olsen starts the year really strong and healthy and then breaks down a little bit. A guy like Colby Parkinson could come in and really contribute inside the 20-yard line for you and give you, 4 or 5 touchdowns on just a few receptions overall. So a guy that, has 15, 20 receptions on the year, give you 5 or 6 touchdowns. He could have that sort of an impact for you. So that would be another guy that I would be on my watch list as far as having an immediate impact as a rookie. Maybe not initially, but as the season goes on, he might have an opportunity.
Yeah, and so in a similar vein in that, but at a different position, I'm going to go with DJ Dallas as a potential guy, because yes, he's in a crowded room, and it's going to get more crowded when Penny comes back. But Penny's coming back from a devastating knee injury. The other 2 guys above him are guys that in college and in the pros have not been able to stay healthy for a long season, and so he is just like Travis Homer last year, who we thought was buried on the depth chart and would never play. DJ Dallas is going to be given an opportunity at some point to show to show that he can be here. And based on his tape from college, he can. He belongs on this team. He checks all the boxes of what Seattle needs and wants at a running back. And I think that he's going to have a limited role, but when given the opportunity, he's going to take advantage of it.
So that's a good one. There's going to be a small but vocal Seahawks Twitter crowd out there that's going to go, what about John Ursua?
Yes.
Can't that guy come in? He had that one reception that really helped us out in the one game. And, we kept him on the roster the entire season. They must really think highly of him. He's going to be able to come in and compete out of that slot position for the Seahawks. Is he the guy that could really have an impact in a breakout season? The answer to all that is yes. Yes, of course he could. Do we think do I think it's likely? I don't think it's likely, only because of all of the other receiving options that are in front of him. It's possible that he does beat out a guy like Philip Dorsett or a guy like David Moore for snaps, or Freddie Swain that we drafted in the 6th round in the draft. Yeah, John Ursary could come in and really have an impact. Be able to, another guy that you play, he makes every catch. He gets open somehow on every throw, and he's a guy that just makes plays. If that should happen, I'm going to be, John Ursula's cheerleader right up front. And that would be very exciting. I just don't know that it's likely with Tyler Lockett and Metcalf and Dorsett in front. Then you've got Olsen and Disley and Hollister that would be probably more likely targets from Russell Wilson than a guy like Ursula. But again, as the season goes on, a guy like Ursula could come into play and have an impact, I think, later on.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I just, I really thought about putting him on my list. I really did. And not just because I know there's going to be a very vocal part of our audience that will be like, well, how did you leave him off? But just because if you go and watch his tape when he was at the University of Hawaii, he has a unique skill set for this team. He's older. He's going to be 26 this next year. And for a second-year player, right? You think about the other guys that are in their like 4th or 5th year that are at the same age. He's an older guy, and so that's going to work against him. But his skill set is he is so quick in the short area. His ability to change direction is incredible. Just watching some of the cuts and moves he makes my knees hurt because he can do that in a way that is inhuman, and his ability to get open in that. And when you go to as the Seahawks move to a more pass-friendly offensive line and hopefully a more pass-friendly game plan, even though, yes, they're going to run the ball and yes, they're going to get their running yards, but those shorter passes and the quicker, getting the ball out of his hands quicker for Wilson, that plays into a guy like
John Ursula's skill set.
His skill set, because it's unique on the roster and it's dominant in what he does. Now, he's never going to beat a guy deep, and he's not that kind of guy.
He has 4.65 speed.
Yeah, I mean he's tiny but runs like a tight end as far as speed goes. But that's not who he is. It's his ability to change direction at an insane rate of speed and with a suddenness that's just unheard of. I mean, the comp that I keep coming back to for him is Wes Welker, the guy who had all those receptions with Tom Brady. In his career, and because that's what he did, right? He was never a guy that would be deep, but he would always get open. He was always open somewhere in the middle of the field. Yeah, and it didn't matter who you put on him because he was just that quick. Not fast, but quick. And it's not a great fit for Russell Wilson's skill set because he is a guy who loves to extend plays and throw deep and do those things, whereas, Ursula is going to be a guy that Wilson's got to hit his back foot on his second step and get the ball out of his hands type of thing. But the talent's there, the potential's there, and I do like it. But I'm with you. You look at Lockett, and you have Metcalf, and you have Dorsett, and you might have Josh Gordon. Where's the playing time going to come from? Where's
the spot on the roster?
I think there's a spot on the roster for him, but to me, it's going to be how many snaps is he going to get a game? 5? Unless there's a bunch of injuries. And I'm not going to count that as a potential for a breakout player if I'm expecting him to get just a few snaps a game.
That's true. That's very true. You know what the exciting part is, Keith? All we did today was talk about the offense.
I know.
We've got an entire defensive lineup to go through next week. So we get to do this all over again. And
honestly, I'll straight up and say this. The defense has some of the best stories as far as thinking about breakout players. There are some.
We're not
fun
doing
ones
rookies,
next
right?
year.
Are we going to do rookies on the defense?
We're going to do it like we did today. So no cheating.
Fair enough.
No cheating. Bring your list of 5 and then have a rookie or 2 ready that we can talk about afterward.
That sounds good.
Because we're both going to want to talk about, there's a couple of rookies in particular. I mean, we're not going to say the names. Wait till next week. But there's a couple that seem pretty obvious for both of us. We know who we're going to pick. But I've already got one that's going to surprise you.
Sweet. I haven't even looked at it yet, so I need to catch up. But I'm looking forward to that show. These shows are so much fun. And we talked this last week. Like, what are we going to do if the season's canceled? Or something. We got to. We can't break our streak. What are we going to do? I'm sure we'll come up with something that's fun and enjoyable. So,
yep. If the season gets absolutely canceled, there will be tears shed. I'll tell you that. Just the idea of having a year without Seahawk football and just. That the way talk about it with my friends and you and just there's just a community aspect to it that is a strong part of my life, and I will miss it greatly if the Seahawk season does not happen. Yeah. So
we'll take listeners on a replay ride or something of the some outstanding season that we all enjoy and
some outstanding season we all enjoy.
Gee, which one could that be?
A Super Bowl championship?
Yeah, maybe.
Perhaps.
What the heck? We might as well. We might as well do the one that we all really like. That has a great outcome. I hear. Yeah. So
you're not talking about 2005 then.
Yeah. Well, that could be interesting. I mean. There was some. That's far enough away where it could be interesting again. I hardly remember it, to be completely honest.
I remember it in.
No, I mean I remember
detail.
the freaking ending. Yeah. All right, so let's wrap this thing up and come back next week. So, find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk, Northwest Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook on Twitter. SeahawksPlaybook.com has all of the shows. And subscribe on your favorite podcast app. So until next week, Keith,
Go
Hawks. Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. The show is at Hawks Playbook. And you can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.